の国のアリス。
Okay, so it's going to confirm your name first, which I always leave it as Alice in these games. And then it's going to confirm where it is that you want to actually stay at for the prologue of the game. This is basically going to continue where the second game leaves off, except you're not going to have ended up on anyone's route, and you're just going to have stayed again for your friends, like you did from the first game to the second. And this picks up basically during an event that occurs, where there's different seasons going on, and she can actually go back to meeting people that had disappeared from the first game in the second game. So they come back through this event that occurs, and she just has to go and meet up with the Joker to be able to go and visit these people throughout this occurring. And that's mainly the premise of the game, with a bunch of other stuff that happens in between. And now we get to pick where we're going to stay, and of course, because I love them, we're going to stay with Nightmare and Grey at the Clover Tower. Unfortunately for them, it's winter there. And he's talking about how it's cold. That would be Nightmare, the leader of Clover Country, and also a dream incubus, one of the managers of Wonderland. And she's commenting about how he's wrapped up in a blanket. Because I've basically already been through this. I can tell you that he repeats, it's cold, it's cold, it's cold, it's cold. And she's like, yeah, it's cold. And he's like, it's really cold. And she's like, yes, it's cold. It's cold, isn't it? And he's like, it's cold. It is really cold. And she's like, yes. He just keeps repeating, it's cold, it's cold. She's commenting about how he needs to stop saying that it's cold, that you already said it's cold, let's just stop it. And he's like, well, if it's cold, I'm going to say it's cold, and it's cold. She was talking about how, just before this, if you say it's cold, that doesn't actually warm you up. So even if you say it's cold, it's not going to do anything. And yes, it is cold. And his response is, he's just like, again, even if I don't say so, it's not warm. And it's cold when it's cold, so it's cold. Roughly. That's what he was saying. They basically repeat this for quite a while. And she's talking about how he looks like he's a nighthawk, and that he's like covered in a large blanket and that he's sharing it with her to try to stay warm. She's like, it really is that cold. My body is so cold that I don't know who I am. And he is literally just shivering. That's like shiver marks. He's actually like, I'm a nightmare because he lives in dreams most of the time. The fireplace saved me. I don't use it most of the time, but I'm glad that we have it, he's basically saying, because it's the right time to use it right now. And her response is, I don't think that it was practical to have it, because this random event just occurred and that's the only time that they're really going to use it. Wonderland usually has perfect weather, no matter which country they're in, and right now they're in the country of Clover still, but the event that's occurring changes it briefly to the country of Joker. And she's like, it's not practical. She's commenting about how it had such a huge fire in the fireplace that she thought that it was like a luxury showroom, and not necessary in this country, is what she said. But like always, Nightmare wants to show off. And she again reiterates that Wonderland has perfect weather. It's not hot or cold. It's just like no opportunity to use the fireplace. There's just none. There's no opportunity. Well, he was talking about how it's cold again. And just before this, he's like, it's an impossibly cold winter. Like, the climate's just impossible right now if you don't want me to freak out. And vomit blood, he's like, I need it. Because he's a sickly incubus, and he gets sick on her quite a bit in her dreams when he's, like, visiting her and stalking her, and, like, basically the guide of Wonderland. And her response to this was, you usually vomit blood anyway. I'm assuming she's probably saying here that it doesn't make any difference either way. And she's like, it won't matter if we light it anyway because it won't be long before it gets cold again anyway. And then after this passes, we won't use it anymore. Or I think it actually was supposed to mean that it'll just get warm soon anyway. So there's no point in using it. She is commenting, though, that it's cold enough right now to actually catch an illness, and she thinks that he should go to the hospital. She's like, I really think so. Because Nightmare's already so sickly on his own. She's like, I'm used to this type of weather. Because we have it where I'm from. He's too weak. And she's like, he's gonna collapse. She constantly worries about this. He's technically supposed to be one of the managers of Wonderland. And upholds the rules. But she's like, even though he's a powerful figure, it's not unusual for you to vomit blood. But it's not something that you should get used to. And she's commenting about his character. She's like, Nightmare has like this huge dislike of hospitals, and it's hardcore, she says. I don't want to be careful, but I have to fight him like a child. It's very important to take you to the hospital. ... Is how that ends right there. And that, without a translator, I could tell you he's like, I'm fine, I don't need a hospital, I'm not going. I love Nightmare. She's still commenting about his powers and, like, what he's capable of, how he's able to, as a dream demon, he's able to read the hearts of others in order to supposedly guide them and uphold the rules of Wonderland. She was thinking to herself that if you can read a person's heart and a person's concern, then you should want to go, and then he cuts her off with his reply. He's like, I don't need a hospital, I'm fine as I am. She's just like, yeah, you're fine. Very sarcastically. She was commenting to herself that he looked like he was going to collapse at any moment, and she's like, I'm sure that it's not my fault if that ends up happening. She's like, he looks really pale. It's evil, it's really, really, really white. Like he's been struck by evil or something. Ghostly pale. She's like, worse than normal. And she's like, it's a pale, so unfortunate, it's a metaphor. It's like a corpse, like a dead man. Well, he was talking about how it's cold. Again, because that's Samui. And he's like, it's just because of the cold. That's why I look like this. Don't pay it any mind. She's probably like, it's not normal. She's like, if it's really cold, then you'll vomit blood, and that's really bad. Well, he was questioning about where is his subordinate. It's cold. It's too cold, isn't it? And she's probably like Gray, because that's who he's questioning about. Like, where is he at? Gray usually babies him. He probably brought him the blanket that they're using right now. She's commenting that because of the move that happened in the last game, which I'm also covering on this channel, that she's now a subordinate of him, that she works underneath him as an assistant, and she helps him with the running of the Clover country in Wonderland, which is where they're at. When he's not living in the dream world as part of, like, the Dream Lord in the in-between realm, he runs Clover Town in Clover country, which is located in Wonderland, but kind of like a different dimension spot. So when the move occurred in the second game, she was left stranded without a place to live, so became a freeloader there, and this continues as if, like, the other game had ended with her just staying there with her friends. So she's still working underneath him and still helping out with Gray and him. He's asking, where is my charm against the cold? Where's the charm? And he's like, it's cold, after it said ... He's actually asking about Gray bringing the hot chocolate. As a ward against the cold. And this is her response. She's like, yes, it's cold, but you don't have to criticize just because it's cold. Because I believe he was criticizing Gray for not getting there fast enough with his charm against the cold. His hot chocolate. And she's like, you don't have the right to criticize because it's more obvious to me than to you because I'm in a dress. And then I believe here she's actually still going on about how he's dressed very warmly. Yep. She's like, and he has a coat over his head. Compared to that, I obviously am not dressed as warmly. And she's like, I despise that. That he's sitting there and criticizing, and she's the one that's like, just manning it up. She's just like, this. ... I hate this. Well, that was a yes, something. I believe it was like a yes. You're right, ma'am, or like young lady or something like that. It didn't translate properly. She's like, it's winter. There's no changing the climate. And I believe this is where he starts to correct her that she can change the season, she just has to do something for it. I believe he's going to... Yeah, he's like, can I teach you about it? Because he wants a different season. Nightmare's very self-serving. He's like, go change the weather for me. Let me teach you real quick how to do that. She's like to him, don't read someone's mind as you please. And then I'll take you to the hospital, won't I? And you'll be there at 1 o'clock. Basically, she was trying to bully him back. And that was the gist of what it translated. And she's commenting about how nosy he is, that he not only gets into other people's dreams, but he also, like, gets into one's heart. She dislikes that too, not because she's frightened, but just because she gets embarrassed. So she complains about it a lot. And she's like, telling him now, I'm telling you to quit, I'm tired of his bad habits. She's like, you know, without saying anything, what things are good, and for me especially. And she's like, it's only a good thing, of course. She's like, there's many good points, and it's the heart of the mind that you're sick and tired of. I believe she's talking about the many good points people have and how you would get sick and tired of the mind, but not necessarily like the heart of the person. And he's, of course, reading all of this while she's thinking it to herself. And he's like, because she said, well, there is something extraordinary about it. And then she mentions, I don't want him to be sent to the hospital, though. And then he freaks out. He's like, because he totally was reading her mind. Any mention of the hospital and he freaks. So just before he talks, she's commenting to herself that you can read minds without permission and skip work to behave like a child. So she's like, you probably should go. And he's like, well, I don't think I should be sent to the hospital to get fixed up. She's like, if I sent you to the hospital, is it that bad? It's also for the sake of your health and of the person's health. So the people that go there, they go there to get fixed up. She's like, it's not a bad thing. So she was commenting just before he said that you wouldn't believe that you can have a conversation with just thoughts. It's funny, but Nightmare accurately reads my mind, like my thoughts, to be able to hold this two-parter conversation with just one person speaking him. And his response was on the overall context of her thoughts. He's like, I'm not going to the hospital, I'll never go. And that, I believe, was the Zetai that he said. Never. She's still commenting about what he's looking like, and that's like a corpse, so his lips are purple and his face is white, she said. And she's like, no matter how you look at it, you need medical care. He is definitely a man that needs to go back to the hospital. And she's like, if you can read my thoughts, then you should just go get him admitted to the hospital. Like, for goodness sake, just go. So she told him just before this that it's so cold that you're going to get sick. More than you already are. So this was him responding to that. And he told her, more than that, Alice, do you want to hear about what I was going to tell you with the event? Yes, right? Like why we suddenly got a cold front here? New weather, like a different weather change? So he changes the subject real quick. So she just thinks it's winter. She's just like, well, it's winter, isn't it? And he's about to correct her assumption. She's like, Anything other than that is hard to believe, even for Wonderland. She was commenting that she didn't know how winter worked in this world, but she thought that it was just winter like it is in theirs. This was his response. He's like, no, you're going to care, because why did it turn into winter? That's not why. And she's like, can you explain to me, like, what are you talking about? She's talking about how in the past, he's got a lot of things to do and a lot of things to explain, being part of management and like a guide of Wonderland. But often they don't explain, like the explanations don't come across very well. And so she ends up more confused than she began. She's like, I just want to ask someone else. I'll do that later. She's like, I don't want to hear it from you. He's like asking her suddenly, what do you mean? Tell me, like, speak up. He was super offended. She's like, he's trying to act important. So he was telling her that, yes, I do have something to tell you, and yes, it is important. Like, the information that I have is worthwhile. She was doubtful. She's like, he acts important just because he's proud. So is this part of that then? She's wondering. She's still doubting him. She's like, I'll be surprised if there's actually anything important to be said. She's like, more than anything, I just remember the move. So she does still, like, have a little bit of credibility that she can give down because the move was pretty out there when it occurred in the last game. She's like, at that time, I could only meet him in my dreams before the move, and then it became a reality, and the nightmare came into the day. Because she started living in the same reality as him. And she's like, oh no, is it another crustal change? Like, is the land actually going to be physically picked up and moved to another dimension again? She's looking out the window and she's like, it's cold, but I can't verify whether or not we've changed locations. She's stating that I can't see too much, that it's hard to view out the window with the color, but it does seem a little bit different from before. So now she's wondering. She's like, I haven't noticed anything outside yet. She's like, when I had the move to Clover country, well, there was some fear, especially when I woke up, and there was no person to see outside. Depending on where it was that she woke up, she may have ended up in the forest, alone, or she may have ended up in a couple other places. There's a gear area, I want to say, in the clock tower. So if she had ended up waking up alone there, then she could have seen that. There's other places, but the room just, like, physically was taken from the location, and she was just dropped in Clover Country randomly overnight. Depending on which location she had stayed at in the last game, or that you had her stay at from the last game, that would determine where she was dropped at. So our first instinct is to look outside to see where she's at. She's like, ... So she's actually making note of all of the landmarks that she sees outside, and she noticed something that made her, like, jolt a little bit, and that was the forest that she thought she saw through the window. That used to be green. It was all entirely dead now. And that's actually where the Joker has set up shop, so it's interesting that she noticed that right there. She's like, it should be green, but it's all dead. Almost flirting with being saved. So, like, just before it turns completely brittle. She's asking herself what happened, like, what's next after the move to Clover? Like, is something else crazy and outrageous going to happen? Why is that forest, like, perishing? Because the seasons would have changed practically overnight. She's like, I'm finally getting used to the country of Clover. And then the world where I'm at, it's moving. Today's world is slowly becoming something else more and more every day. She's worried about all of the changes. Especially just as she starts getting used to something. She's like, oh, don't change anymore, please. Well, he's saying, don't worry, and she's like, more changes, I definitely don't want that. And he's like, don't worry. Because she was thinking that it was crustal changes again. Like, getting physically taken somewhere else and leaving behind people. He's like, don't worry about that, it's not that. And he's like, I don't think it's crustal movement, so please, don't be afraid. She's like, if it's not a crustal change, why is it snowing suddenly overnight? She was thinking to herself just before he replied that in this country time has no regularity. But the climate was stable the entire time that she was here, both in Clover Country in the last game and Heart Country in the first game. And she's like, that's all ended right now. And his response was that you've been saying that? It's winter. So now she's confused. She's like, it is winter. Like, what are you talking about? Why are we having this circular conversation? So she was like, I think I'm getting used to this world. And then on the next page she was like, this is a time-worn world. It's a strange country where time moves slowly and irregularly. It's a world of wonders for me, she said. She's like, sometimes it seems unusual, but actually in this world, that's the regular common sense. And she's like, I thought seasons didn't exist in such a busy world, and they can change the morning and the evening by choice. So she's like, it doesn't make sense that they're stuck with these different climate changes all of a sudden. And she's like, time changes only, and that's enough to be confused, because it can be any time, morning right after night, or like evening right after afternoon, so she's getting confused. She's still commenting about how it's confusing, but it makes no sense. And she's like, there's been no change since I came to this world in the climate. So it is very sudden, ...
せっかくだから雪遊びでもしようか。
So just before this, she was thinking to herself, of course there was snow, but I thought there was absolutely no forest there. So she doesn't even remember the forest. His response was, let's go play in the snow. I am so impatient. Like, he doesn't even care that she's got all of these concerns from the previous games on her mind. He's like, I want to enjoy the weather. Let's go build a snowman. So just before this, she was talking about how she needed to say something to him, and can he keep a secret? And then Gray pops in, all of a sudden, the missing subordinate, who's bringing them the charm, the hot chocolate against the cold. And he's like... He's like, Nightmare, stop voluntarily going to places that'll give you a cold. Or that you can imitate a cold to skip work. Stop doing that. Even now, you're still not feeling well, so don't go out trying to make it worse, he was basically saying. And then he's like, thank you, here's your hot chocolate. Or thank you to the hot chocolate. Yeah, he's like, please, here, it's the hot chocolate. Now she's actually commenting on Gray's character, so it's almost like their mini introduction. She's talking about how he's a subordinate who takes care of Nightmare like a mother would. And that his name is Gray, Gray Ringmark. Also known as Mr. Lizard. Lizard-san. She's like, he's a competent confidant, and he is as strong as the Knight of the Heart's Castle Ace. Or at least it seems that way. And she's commenting to herself that he's the most normal one there in Clover Country to her, and that it doesn't seem to lead to any scary images when she thinks of him, that to her, he's actually a kind adult, which is really rare in Wonderland. It's like non-existent. She's considered kind of mean by herself and like other people, but they think she's kind, because they're mean to each other. She's like, thank you, Gray, and she's got a huge smile on her face.
お前は気が利くな。凍えた体に温かい飲み物は最高だ。やっぱり冬はココアに限る。風邪薬よりココア、注射よりココアだ。
Nightmare's all excited about his hot cocoa. He's actually stating just before this, don't be shy, hot drinks are best for your body. He's like, drink up.
ココアに薬用はありませんよ。薬や注射にかなうはずもありません。
And just before this, Nightmare was finishing out by saying, after all, it's only in winter that you can have cocoa. And cocoa is better than cold medicine. Bring more cocoa than an injection. Like an injection from the hospital. He was like, I prefer hot chocolate, thank you. And then Gray cut in and he was like, there's no cold medicine in the cocoa, and there's no way I can give you an injection myself.
お望みなら冬でなくてもいつだってココアをお出ししますから、今すぐにでも入院なさってください。
Gray continued by saying, if you want, it's always a waste in the winter. I'll give you cocoa, but please, go be hospitalized right away. Because they're all worried about Nightmare's health, especially with the climate dropping suddenly to below freezing weather. And they're like, hot chocolate does not take the place of medicine. And she's like, after all, what can you do? Or after all, what can it do? Sorry. She's thinking to herself that, considering the cold and slightly visible air volume, she could be mistaken about it being winter, based on a person's conversation. Because she's starting to hear, or remember that she overheard, that there's other places with other seasons, but she's still thinking it works like our world, where it's one season pretty much everywhere nearby.
なんでと言われても冬は冬だぞ。
お
Nightmare was asking why she was even questioning about it. He was like, why? Winter is winter, isn't it? Wasn't that what you were saying? And then this would be her response. She's thinking to herself with an exasperated look. She's thinking to herself, I know that. What I want to say is, why is it that it's winter just so suddenly? Like, is there a reason? Like, was it because of something? Did something happen? She's like, even though the seasons have changed, it happened suddenly. It didn't get cold gradually, like normal. This change is going to be too rapid to be normal. Or is taking place too rapid to be normal. She's like, yes, it's way too urgent that it's happening. She's like, the pace is too rapid to be normal, or to have a place here in this territory.
Ah, そうか。君が来てから冬が来たのは初めてか。
So she was actually commenting about how it was when she was flown to Clover from Heart Country, which happened in her sleep. Just dropping her randomly in any location. And Grey Ring Mart cuts in with a comment. This is his response. He's like, oh yeah, since you came, this is your very first time experiencing winter.
君の知っている冬と何ら変わりはない。ちなみにここは冬だが、春、夏、秋もあるぞ。
And so after Grey is remarking about how she is experiencing her very first season change with them, which means her first time experiencing Joker and the seasons that she needs to bypass to get through to other territories, Nightmare cuts in, and this is his response to what the situation is. He's like, don't worry. Don't you know what winter is? There is no change. Winter is here. By the way, so is spring, summer, and autumn. So he's talking about how all of the seasons are happening at once in different territories. So don't worry, like, the land hasn't physically changed, and the people haven't been taken, like she experienced before. So he's cutting him off and just saying that it's basically the weather that's changed, and only that. So it's just winter, don't you know? Okay, so in other words, she's thinking to herself that there is spring, summer, autumn, and winter for normal seasons, and that means that there is a season, but she doesn't understand what they're talking about because they haven't clarified that they're all happening at once, just that they occur. So he cuts in. And he's just like, I have to change clothes, and the fireplace, it must be made to run hotter. And then he continues his statement here. He's like, I've been trying to keep everything cleaned up, and I'm glad that we could use the fireplace right away. So that means Gray's been doing everything like normal. She's thinking to herself that nobody ever expected to use it, which is what she had been telling Nightmare at the beginning, that it was an absolutely useless thing to have in their office. Because technically that's both their office and their home, Clover Tower. And she's like, I totally thought it was a decoration, but it's the same fireplace as the one that we would have in our house. She's like, I didn't want to be the one to clean it. I never thought it would be practical.
ナイトメア様も体を冷やさないように注意してください。本当は体調管理くらいご自分でなさっていただきたいんですが。
Gray's telling him, cool yourself down. And then he's like, you're not in really good condition. Are you able to do it yourself? That's roughly what I got out of that.
さあどうぞ、ナイトメア様。
And he's like, come on, Nightmare. Take better care of yourself.
Gray, お前は暇さえあれば仕事仕事だ。
So she was thinking to herself right after Gray had said that to Nightmare, that she had also told Nightmare this. And she's like... Gray offers documents as soon as he had offered the cocoa, and as soon as Nightmare had seen the documents, Nightmare pulled his, like, I don't want to do this face. So... Gray was basically like, shape up so you can do your work, and here's your cocoa, but then hands him the documents along with it, like, this is your fuel, get this done. And Nightmare pulled his I don't want to work face, and she's just like, oh my goodness.
外を見ろ。何が見える？
Nightmare's just like, look out, like, can't you see? I'm feeling? He's basically like, pity me. And she looks kind of irritated. She was like, why do we have to deal with this? She was thinking to herself just before this an uncountable number of days for, like, how long they've had to deal with this, pretty much, I believe, is what she was thinking. Gray's response was actually in reference to what Nightmare had said about look out, like look at how he was feeling and like look at the weather and everything. So Gray responded back. He's like, "Oh, so you want to play in the snow? Don't you have a lot of work to do?" Huh. So even though he's still pulling the pity me card, he's like reminding him, "Oh, but you wanted to play in the snow." Huh. And she's thinking to herself, we haven't made any progress in our work for an increased number of hours because of Nightmare and his illness and the mess of blood that had flown every which way. And she's like, I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have dealt with it the way that Gray has. And he's like, I'd love to be able to do those things. Don't you know I love this season? He's like, I just can't afford it. And this is her thinking to herself. Roughly, I think she was mentioning that our hands are full of surprises, or that life hands us a lot of surprises. And Gray was remarking to what Nightmare had said about not being able to go outside or do these things or like complete his work because of his illness. This response. He was like, he's like, even if this wasn't the case, you would be puzzled for another excuse, basically, like something else to be able to say to get out of doing it. She was commenting to herself that she was shocked that he had just, like, outright straightforward, like, said that he was a slacker. Gray's usually really professional and well-behaved in front of her as a mask, but he was actually an assassin and was assigned to killing Nightmare, which you find out, like, in a couple different ways, and in a couple different games. So she's thinking to herself that the change this time, it was not crustal movement, so it's topographical, she was thinking, and that it doesn't mean that the crustal movements have changed. So what are they talking about? And then this was their response. Oh no, but...
大丈夫だよ。心配するようなことはない。何かが消えたというようなこともね。
So Gray was cutting in and saying, like, oh no. But this is, and then Nightmare cuts in with, like, his smug remark, and he tells them that it's alright, there's no information to distribute, that something has just gone away. And she's like, what?
Season については知っておくべきだな。君にとっては初めてだろう。
So she was thinking to herself just before this that after his little smug statement, that it was a very bad way of saying things, like of saying anything. And this is Nightmare's response, because again, he can read people's thoughts, so like he understands the context of what she was thinking and stating.
April season. 確かにそれは君も知っておくべきだな。
So Nightmare cuts in and actually starts to explain about the event, like what's going on and what happened, and he's like, well, it's about April season. You should know. It's a first time for you, Alice. And Gray cuts in. Gray doesn't quite understand that she's an outsider, that she's literally from a different world and things work differently just yet, because she's still kind of newly moved, depending on which route you took. You may not have spent enough time with him for him to understand the difference. But he's like, April is the season for April, like she should just know. And then he's like, you should know it. She was thinking to herself, April season, what's that? That makes no sense to me. But April season is the event. It's what they call it. For April Fools. And she's commenting about that. April Fool's Day. I heard about the April season, but I think I'm missing something. And she's like, far from April season, the scenery outside the window is purely winter. Alright, you guys, we're going to stop here. This is pretty much the second part of the prologue, where you're going to start stat building and also who you're going to start visiting. So that's how you're going to end up on a route for a certain person. And I'll try to get up another video by next week, so that way they're kind of keeping pace with each other, because the next video for Clover